So we're going to round out our overview of IP, and we're going to talk about some basic TCP/IP services, namely DHCP and DNS. And we're discussing them at this point in the course just simply because DHCP and DNS are pretty much ubiquitous. You're going to find them on any network you happen to run across. In fact, a lot of people may be running DHCP at home and may not even realize it just because it's built into so many of these consumer-grade routers and switches and so forth. So, first, a little bit of review. You'll recall IP is a layer 3 protocol and uses logical addresses, meaning that the logical address is not tied to any specific device. These logical addresses can be moved from device to device. You can have certain addresses that represent multiple devices, or multiple addresses all bound to the same device. So the question comes up, if these are logical addresses, how do you configure them? Well, the first way is the most obvious. You can go to every workstation on your network and manually set an IP address. That works good if you've got 5 workstations and you have complete control. But if you have 5,000 workstations spread across 6 states and 2 countries, then that's not really a workable solution. You'll have spreadsheet after spreadsheet of what IP addresses are assigned to what users and what servers and what workstations, and it's just a huge pain in the backside. No, you'll want to use the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. Now, simply put, a DHCP server is configured to hand out IP addresses. You go into the DHCP server and you say, this is my pool of addresses. I want you to start at 192.168.15.5, and I want you to hand out addresses from .5 all the way up to .200. And when you hand out this IP address, hand out this default gateway and these DNS servers and this domain name. And you can also configure other different parameters inside the DHCP server. If you get into Cisco Voice, you'll use an option to tell your Cisco phones, or any voice over IP enabled phone actually, what server to get its configuration information from. But again, this is an overview, so we won't get too far into that. So we'll give you a basic overview of how DHCP works, and then we'll pull it up in Wireshark, and we'll actually look at the protocol level. So, say you have a server and a workstation here. This is your DHCP server over on the right, and this is your workstation on the left. This workstation powers up, it initializes its IP stack, and realizes, oh, I'm configured for DHCP. I'm going to send out a DHCP discover. Hey, I'm here on the network. What DHCP servers are out there on the network? Now, this is a broadcast. It goes to the all ones address in Ethernet, and you'll see that when we pull it up in Wireshark. Now, what that means is that your DHCP server and your workstation have to be on the same physical piece of wire, or you have to have a DHCP helper relay configured in one of your routers. Now, DHCP relaying is not really covered in the CCENT course other than to realize that it's there and it exists as a thing. But what's important to realize is that this DHCP discover is a broadcast. The DHCP server then replies back to your workstation with a DHCP offer. Hey, I can service your DHCP request. Now, if you have multiple DHCP servers on the network, this workstation may get multiple DHCP offers back. Most organizations only have one per network. It just cuts down on confusion. So once this workstation knows the MAC address of a DHCP server or multiple DHCP servers, then your workstation sends out a DHCP request. It asks the DHCP server, okay, I picked you to service my DHCP request. Can you give me an IP address? Now, there's a few different ways this DHCP request can go down. If this is a workstation that was already on this network, let's say it's a workstation that physically sits under someone's desk, so it's not ever going to move. It's going to make a DHCP request, and it's going to tell the DHCP server, here's the IP address I already have. Can I just keep this DHCP address? And most of the time, the DHCP server will reply back and say, yes, you can keep that IP address. If it's not ever been on this network before, or if its configuration has been cleared, it may say, I don't have an address, just pick one out of your pool and hand it to me. In either case, the DHCP server will reply back with a DHCP acknowledge. And inside this DHCP acknowledge is where the IP address, default gateway, DNS servers, domain names, and any other DHCP options are communicated back to the workstation. So as promised, here is a DHCP capture inside Wireshark, and this file is available as part of the work files for this particular course. Now you'll notice there's 4 packets here, just like in our example. the discover, the offer, the request, and the acknowledge. So this is what happens. This workstation, in this case, it does not have an IP address. Its source is all zeros. Its destination is all 255s. It's broadcast. You look down here and you can see on the Ethernet, the destination is broadcast. DHCP discover, and it has a transaction ID so that it knows what the answer is for. So it sends out a DHCP discover and says, hey, I am looking for a boot server. And technically it's an extension of boot here, the boot protocol. And if you'll notice down here, it is not actually requesting an IP address. It does not have an IP address on this network. So the DHCP server replies back, in this case 192.168.0.1. It's going to offer it the address of 0.10, but it has not accepted that yet. So that's the destination address, but if you look up here in the Ethernet, you'll see that it unicasts it back. So the broadcast comes from the workstation, and the DHCP server then replies back to this workstation. Since it knows what the MAC address is, it can direct it directly to that workstation. So it replies back, and it says, hey, here's the address you had. Here is my address that I'm going to give you, and here's my server address where it's coming from. And you can look down through here and you see the subnet mask and the renewal time and the rebinding time. We won't get into how the leases work in DHCP. We're just stepping through the packets just so you can get a better idea of how it works. At this point, the workstation replies back to the server and says, okay, you offered me this address. I'm going to actually request this address now. And of course, the DHCP server replies back with an acknowledgement saying, yes, you can actually keep that address. You notice that even at this point, it's still saying the client IP address is all zeros, but it says you can keep 192.168.0.10. And at that point, IP communications can be established. We will pick up in the next video and discuss DNS.